They say old age is the tax life charges for the stubborn privilege of still being here. I whisper that phrase to myself almost every morning when I wake up alone in a wide, empty bed. Around me, the silence of my house presses in, and every room carries memories so heavy they almost feel alive. At 67, I've learned that loneliness is not only a passing state, it becomes a steady way of life, one you must adapt to whether you want to or not. My name is Myrtle Edmonds. Once, I was Professor Edmonds teaching literature at the University of Illinois, guiding young minds through Shakespeare and Faulkner. I was a wife, then a mother. Now, I am just Myrtle, a widow, a single woman living by herself in an old two-story Victorian house on Maple Avenue in Downers Grove. This house is no stranger to me. I grew up in it, inherited it from my parents, and later walked Richard, my husband, through its front door as a bride. Our only child, Ashton, was born here, and took his first steps on these wooden floors. This house has always been my anchor, binding me to life's best and hardest moments. 5 years ago, Richard left me. Not by choice, of course. A heart attack claimed him during his morning jog. Though he had always been careful with his health running, avoiding alcohol and cigarettes, watching every calorie, every bit of cholesterol. He was disciplined, and yet he went first. That's the cruel way life works sometimes. He left me with this house, a mountain of memories, and a son who long ago moved into a life of his own. This morning carries the chill of autumn, the air sharp and clean. I sit in my rocking chair on the veranda, a cup of tea warming my hands, watching the sun slowly paint the rooftops of the neighborhood in gold. Across the street, the Brocklists have already rushed off to work, their children skipping toward school. The street soon grows quiet again, with only the occasional car rumbling by. People often ask why I don't sell this big, aging house and move into something smaller, easier, a neat little apartment, or perhaps a retirement complex where everything is handled for me. Why keep up such a burden alone, Mia? They say with kind but uncomprehending eyes, but they will never understand. To them, it's just a house. To me, it's something more. It's alive. Each creak of a floorboard, each crack in the ceiling, each patch of faded wallpaper is tied to a chapter of my story. It's a partner in my solitude, a witness to all I've lived through. And besides, I am not completely alone. Ashton, my only son, still calls me once a week. Once a month, he makes the trip from Chicago to have dinner with me. He lives in a sleek apartment overlooking Lake Michigan and works as a financial analyst, always busy, always moving forward. The last time he came, I noticed the silver creeping into his hair, the lines settling around his eyes. He's 42 now. I still see the boy he used to be, but time has carved a serious man out of him. That evening, as he stirred the soup I'd made from his favorite childhood recipe, Ashton said quietly, "Mum, I met someone. Her name is Cassidy. I think we're serious." Ashton has never married. He's had girlfriends, yes, but none who lasted long. His attention was always pulled toward his work, his career, his future, just like his father before him. I smiled, told him I was happy, but deep inside, something twisted tight. Not jealousy, no, never that. It was fear. Fear of losing the last thread that keeps me connected to the world outside these walls. "I want you two to meet," Ashton continued, his voice hopeful. "Next time, I'll bring her to dinner. And today, that moment has come. Tonight, my son will walk through my door with Cassidy at his side. I will smile, ask the right questions, play the role of the welcoming mother, and pretend I am excited about this new addition to our little family. But inside, I am bracing myself, I rise from my chair and head to the kitchen. I want tonight to be special. Something Ashton will remember. I consider duck with oranges or baked trout with almonds. Pulling out my mother's old cookbook. Its pages yellow and worn. I run my fingers over the familiar recipes. Once, I loved cooking. When I was younger, I hosted dinner parties for colleagues, always trying new dishes, enjoying the laughter around the table. But these days, cooking for one feels empty. Most nights, I make a salad or heat something from the freezer. But today I must do more. I choose roast beef, Ashton's favorite. Alongside it, I'll serve mashed potatoes with truffle oil, grilled asparagus, and of course, apple pie for dessert. For hours, I lose myself in the work. I peel, chop, season, and stir. The rhythm of cooking steadies me, and for a while, I forget the unease in my chest. By 6 o'clock, the table gleams. I've set it with my best china, polished the silver, and lit candles that flicker against the walls. From Richard's old collection, I open a bottle of Merlot, letting it breathe. In my bedroom, I slip into a dark blue dress, the one Richard always said brought out the color of my eyes. Around my neck rests the pearl necklace he gave me on our 30th anniversary. My grey hair is pulled into a neat bun, my face touched with just enough makeup to soften the lines. At precisely 6:30. The doorbell rings. I inhale deeply, exhale slowly, and make my way to the door. Ashton stands tall in the doorway, dressed in a dark suit that makes him look so much like his father it nearly stops my heart. Beside him stands Cassidy. The first thing I notice is her youth. She cannot be more than 30. Her long blonde hair cascades down her shoulders. Her blue eyes sparkle with what seems like admiration, though something about it feels rehearsed. Her lips curve into a perfect smile, her teeth unnaturally white. A bright red dress clings to her figure, paired with impossibly high heels that make me think instantly of my own tired knees. "Mum, this is Cassidy Thorndyke," Ashton says, proudly, his tone brimming with a kind of pride that feels almost like possession. "Mrs. Edmonds, I've heard so much about you." Cassidy gushes, stepping forward and wrapping me in a hug far too tight for someone she has just met. The scent of her perfume is strong, sweet, floral, but overwhelming. "Just myrtle. Please," I say softly as I step back, freeing myself from her grasp. "Come in. Dinner is ready." As we move toward the dining room, I notice Cassidy's eyes sweeping across my home. She pauses at the silver candelabra, lingers on the antique clock above the mantel, studies the painting in its heavy frame. "What a lovely house," she says brightly. "So authentic. How old is it?" "It was built in 1911, I reply as I pour wine into the glasses. "And you live here alone? After your husband passed?" There's pity in her tone, or something close to it. But beneath it, another note I can't quite name. "Yes, for 5 years now." "It must be so hard to keep up a house this size at your age," she remarks, her words smooth but laced with condescension that pricks at my pride. Ashton's mother has always been independent. My son cuts in gently, and I silently thank him. Dinner unfolds quietly enough. Ashton talks about a new project at work that might earn him a promotion. Cassidy compliments my cooking, though I notice her fork only pushes food around her plate. "What do you do, Cassidy?" I ask during a pause. "I work in real estate," she says with a smile. "I help people find their dream homes or sell their old ones at the best price. I'm one of the top agents at my agency." "She's amazing," Ashton adds proudly. "Last month she closed a $2 million deal." "Impressive," I say, though inside my stomach tightens. Cassidy glances around the dining room again, her eyes calculating. Your house, Myrtle, could be worth a fortune. Young families would pay top dollar for a Victorian like this, especially in this neighborhood. I'm not selling, I reply quickly, more sharply than I intended. Of course, she says smoothly, though her eyes continue scanning as though pricing each corner. But if you ever change your mind. After dinner, we move to the living room for coffee and pie. Cassidy perks up when she sees the photographs on the mantel. Oh, look, is this Ashton as a little boy? She picks up a silver frame showing him on a bicycle. What a handsome child. And this must be you and your husband. She lifts our wedding photo, and something inside me flinches. These relics are too dear, too private to be touched by her hands. Yes, I say carefully. That was our wedding, 1979. You were such a beautiful couple, she exclaims. And so young. How old were you? 21, I answer. The memory rising vividly, the garden ceremony right here at the house, my simple white dress, Richard's nervous smile, the rain that began just as we said our vows. My mother said it was good luck. Ashton was born 2 years later. And Ashton is your only child? You never wanted more? She asks, tilting her head. I glance at Ashton, hoping he'll end her probing, but he is busy scrolling through his phone. We wanted more, I say softly. It didn't happen. Cassidy nods with practiced sympathy, but her eyes remain detached, collecting details. And your pension? Is it enough to live comfortably? She asks suddenly. I see Ashton tense beside. Cassidy, that's not an appropriate question, he says gently. Oh, I'm sorry, she replies sweetly. I just worry about Myrtle's future. So many elderly people struggle. There's nothing wrong with me, I answer firmly. I have my university pension. I have savings. And the house is fully mine. At the mention of savings, her eyes brighten. I scold myself silently for the slip. That's wonderful, she says, smiling wide. So many elderly people can't afford good care in their old age. My grandmother spent her last years in a beautiful nursing home with nurses, a garden, activities. It was much better than her being alone in a big house, where she could fall or get hurt. I hear how easily she weaves the idea of a nursing home into the conversation, sliding it in as though it were the most natural next step in my life. And though her words sound caring, I feel a chill along my spine. I prefer to stay in my own home. Thank you, I say, standing up. Anyone else want more coffee? Later, as Ashton walks Cassidy to her car, I stand at the window and watch them say goodbye. He hugs her and kisses her, and in his movements I see a tenderness and desire that only comes at the beginning of a relationship, when the world seems full of possibilities and the partner seems perfect. I remember how I looked at Richard with the same loving eyes, how I believed that our love would overcome any difficulties. And in many ways, I was right. We lived together for 40 years, raised a son, built careers, and grew old together. But was it a perfect marriage number? There were quarrels, disappointments, moments of loneliness, even just the two of us. There were compromises that I still feel bitter about. Ashton walks back into the house, his face glowing with happiness. So, what do you think? He asks, helping me clear the table. She's energetic, I answer cautiously. Isn't she beautiful? He doesn't notice my tone, and smart and ambitious. You know, Mom, I think she's the one. Have you two known each other a long time? I ask, trying to sound neutral. 3 months, he replies. And I feel my heart drop. 3 months is nothing to get to know a person. But sometimes you just know. You know, like how you knew with Dad. I don't tell him that his dad and I dated for 2 years before we got married. That we've known each other since we were kids, growing up in the neighborhood, sharing books and dreams long before we shared a bed. I want you to be happy for me, Mom, Ashton says. And you can hear the same insistence in his voice that he had as a 5-year-old when he demanded another bedtime story. I want you to be happy, I answer honestly. Just take your time, okay? Get to know her better. I already know everything I need to know, he says with a confidence that scares me with. It's blindness. She's special, Mom. You're going to love her again. You'll see. Later, lying in bed, I reflect on Cassidy Thorndyke, about her too bright smile, her too personal questions, the way her eyes evaluated my house, my things, my life, about the way she talked about the nursing home as if it were a logical extension of my story. Maybe I'm being unfair. Perhaps she really loves Ashton, not his potential inheritance or my house. Perhaps her interest in my finances was just an awkward attempt to show concern. But something inside me, the same instinct that helped me recognize the lies and the excuses of students who didn't turn in their essays on time, says, "Be careful, Myrtle. This woman is not who she says she is." I fall asleep with the unsettling feeling that the harmony of my quiet life has been disrupted by the appearance of Cassidy Thorndyke, and that the worst is yet to come. After first meeting Cassidy, I hoped that my fears were exaggerated. Perhaps her intrusive questions and scrutiny of my home was simply a manifestation of nervousness, a desire to make a good impression. But the following weeks dashed those hopes. Ashton came less often, and when he did, it was almost always with Cassidy. She became a constant character in our family life, like a shadow that could not be separated from my son. Visits turned from quiet conversations over a cup of tea to noisy intrusions. Cassidy always spoke too loudly, laughed too loudly. Her presence filled the house, leaving no room for the intimacy between Ashton and me. I noticed other changes as, my son dressed differently, expensive designer shirts instead of his usual classic suits. A new watch that I washer was worth 3 of my monthly pensions. His hair, previously always neatly cut, was now styled in a fashionable style that frankly made him look like a cocky Wall Street broker. Cassidy thinks I need to freshen up my image, he explained when I cautiously asked about the change. She says that in my career, appearance is as important as professionalism. I remained silent, though I wanted to say that appearance was the packaging, and that the inside was far more important. That a bright wrapper often hides a mediocre product. That his father, one of the most respected economists in our city, never chased fashion, but always looked elegant and dignified. In early December, about a month after we first met Cassidy, Ashton called me in the middle of the week, an unusual occurrence given his busy schedule. "Mom, I have amazing news." His voice sounded excited, almost like when he was a kid and would come running in from the street to tell me about a frog he'd found or a shore he'd built. Cassidy and Andy are engaged. I felt a cold hand squeeze my heart, but tried to keep my voice sounding joyful. "It's unexpected, dear. You've only known each other a short time after all. When you know it's your man, why wait?" He replied with enthusiasm of a young man in love, not a 42-year-old man who should have realized that marriage was not a sprint, but a marathon that required careful preparation. "I think a short engagement period would still be fine," I remarked cautiously. "To get to know each other better, to warm up to each other." "We've already decided the wedding will be in February," he interrupted me, and I realized that the decision had already been made, and no one was interested in my opinion. "That's only 2 months away." My voice sounded weak, even to myself. "Cassidy says there's no point in wasting time and money on long preparations. She wants a modest ceremony, just that closest people. You'll be the only guest from my side." The only guest, as if he hadn't have friends, co-workers he'd worked with for years, distant relatives who remembered him as a child. As if his whole life had narrowed down to Cassidy and her plans and her family. Are they coming? Cassidy has a complicated relationship with her parents, he answered evasively. Only her sister will but the ceremony. Another alarm bell. A woman who doesn't have a close relationship with her own family is unlikely to value her husband's family ties. Ashton, I know you are an adult and make your own decisions. But exactly, Mom. His voice became harsher. I make my own decisions. And I decided to marry Cassidy. I'm worshipping you would be happy for me. I want you to be happy, I said quietly. It's just that things are happening so fast. Cassidy said, You might not approve. A note of accusation came into his voice. She said, A lot of mothers have a hard time accepting their sons' choices, especially if they're used to controlling their lives. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. Controlling me, who had always encouraged his independence, who had let him go to study in another state, even though it was heartbreaking to think my only child would be so far away. Me, who never interfered in his personal life, even when he was dating that awful girl in college. Ashton, you know that's not true, I said as calmly as I could. I've always respected your decisions. Then respect this one too, he retorted. Cassidy and I love each other and we want to be together. I thought you'd be happy that I finally found my SOULMAT in the following weeks. The situation only got worse. Cassidy started showing up at my house even without Ashton, bringing wedding dress catalogs, sample invitations, guest lists, all the trappings of wedding preparation that was supposed to bring us closer together. But each visit from her left me with a sense of anxiety and exhaustion. Myrtle, I'm so excited to have you at our wedding, she'd say, leaping through a magazine with pictures of wedding cakes. Ashton is so worried about you. He worries about your health all the time. There's nothing wrong with my health, I replied, surprised. I had a routine checkup just a month ago. And Dr. Finch said, I'm in great shape for my age. Oh, of course. Cassidy smiled with that special expression that people usually save for small children or very old people. Condescending and not to be taken seriously. It's just that Ashton has noticed you've become a forgetful. He said you forgot where you left your car keys last time. It happens to everyone, I countered, feeling the irritation building. And to young people, too. Of course, she patted my arm as if soothing a distraught child. But as you get older, things like that become a worrying sign, don't they? My grandmother started the same way. First the keys, then the grandchildren's names, and then she paused, looking at meaningfully. Well, you know, I understood what she was getting at, and it scared me. She was trying to plant a seed of doubt in Ashton's mind about my mental competence. Today, forgotten keys. Tomorrow, a dementia diagnosis and a court ruling that I was incompetent. Next day, I called my old friend Rollins Billings. We had known each other since university, where he taught law and I taught literature. Since Richard's death, Rollins had been one of the few people who regularly checked in on me, bringing me books and just being there for me when the loneliness became unbearable. Rollins, I need your professional counseling, I said when he answered. What's wrong, Myrtle? His deep voice, as always, acted soothingly. My son has decided to marry a woman he's only known for 3 months. And I have every reason to believe she's not so much interested in him as she is in my house and money. I told him everything about me first meeting with Cassidy, about her obsessive questions about my finances, about how quickly she'd gotten Ashton to propose, about her hints about my supposedly declining health. The next day, we met at a small cafe in a neighboring town. I didn't want to risk accidentally running into Ashton or Cassidy. Rollins brought a folder of papers with him. First, you need to update your will, he said, spreading the papers out on the table. If you have specific wishes about who and what gets what when you die, they need to be clearly recorded. I always plan to leave everything to Ashton, I said. Literally. He's my only child, and that's your right. Rollins nodded. But you can stipulate certain conditions. For example, the house can go into a trust administered by a trustee, with the stipulation that you can live in it for the rest of your life. We made a new will. It was drafted in such a way that the house would go into a trust set up to support victims of financial fraud with the condition that I could live in it for the rest of my life. Most of my savings also went into the trust with a small amount for Ashton, enough to show that I wasn't disinheriting him out of revenge, but not enough to attract the attention of fortune hunters. In addition to the will, we prepared a few other documents. A power of attorney for Rollins who could represent my interests in the event of my incapacity, a medical directive clearly stating my wishes for treatment, and most importantly, their results of an independent medical examination confirming my full mental competence. That's in case they try to prove you're incapacitated, Rollins explained. That kind of thing happens more often than you think, especially when it comes to elderly people with valuable assets. Ashton and Cassidy's wedding went off without me as planned. I sat at home that day going through old photo albums. Ashton in the maternity ward wrapped in a blue blanket. Ashton taking his first steps, holding his father's hand. Ashton at his high school graduation, so serious in his robe and cap. Ashton receiving his college diploma. I didn't cry. Tears would have been a sign that I had come to terms with the loss. And I wasn't. I was preparing for the battle I was sure was about to begin. Ashton and Cassidy's honeymoon lasted 2 weeks. That time, I hadn't received a single phone call or text. It was as if me son, having flown to the other side of the world, had forgotten I existed. They returned in early March, and Ashton called to say that he and Cassidy were moving into a new home, a large mansion in an upscale Chicago neighborhood. Cassidy found a terrific place, he recounted enthusiastically. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, a garden, a 2-car garage. Sounds impressive, I said, thinking about how a house like that compared to his, albeit good, but still limited financial analyst salary. And expensive. Well, the real estate market is booming right now, he replied evasively. Cassidy says it's a great investment. And then in late May, they showed up unexpectedly on my doorstep. Door call, no warning, just rang the doorbell on a sunny Saturday morning. Ashton Cassidy. I couldn't hide my surprise. What a surprise. Hi, Mom. Ashton hugged me, but somehow mechanically without the warmth of before. We were driving by and thought we'd stop by. Driving by like my house was a random landmark on their route, not the place where he'd grown up. Mum, Ashton began as we sat down in the living room. Cassidy and I have been doing a lot of thinking, and we've decided it's time to take some measures for your good. Measures? I felt my throat constrict. What kind of measures? Nothing drastic, he said quickly, avoiding my gaze. Just maybe this. House is too big for you and too old. Requires too much effort and money to maintain. We found the perfect place. Cassidy picked up with enthusiasm. The Golden Autumn Residency is not a nursing home as you might think. It's an apartment complex for active seniors. It has all amenities, medical staff around the clock, a swimming pool, a library, a cave. And what makes you think I want to move there? I asked, trying to remain calm. Mum, it's for your own good. Ashton finally looked me in the eye. You're getting older. What if you fall and can't call for help? I'm 67 years old, not 97. I interrupted him. I'm in perfect health, as evidenced by regular medical checkups. And I have no intention of moving anywhere. That metal. Cassidy leaned forward. Think of the possibilities. You could sell this house. Ashton and I can help you find a buyer. I've already looked at a few options and used the proceeds to live comfortably in Golden Autumn for the rest of your life. This is it. Just what he'd been waiting for and dreading. Cassidy showed her cards. She wanted me to sell the house, and the money probably came under their control somehow. I apologize for not adhering to the stated chapter size. You're right. I made a mistake. Let me rewrite the chapter, strictly adhering to the 10,000 characters limit with no spaces. I will keep a close eye on the character count. After that memorable conversation about moving to Golden Autumn, Ashton and Cassidy began to visit me more often. But these visits were not joyful. Each time Cassidy found new arguments in favor of selling the house. The roof needed repair. The heating system was outdated. The foundation was cracking. There was a deliberate concern in her words. But her eyes remained cold and calculating. Ashton, on the other hand, was growing increasingly distant. He avoided direct gaze, spoke sparingly and reluctantly, as if he were performing a burdensome duty. I tried to find glimpses of my old son in him, the one who had come to me for advice, who had shared his plans and dreams, who had laughed at my old jokes, but in vain. In front of me was a stranger, a puppet in hands of my greedy wife. After each of their visits, I called Rollins to report new attempts at pressure. They're getting more persistent, I told him after another unpleasant conversation. Cassidy bluntly stated that I was not at the age to make serious financial decisions. I'm afraid they might do something drastic. All the legal documents are in place, Rollins reassured me. They can't do anything without your consent. If you feel threatened, call immediately and I'll come over. In June, I decided to hire a private investigator to find out more about Cassidy Thorndyke. This measure seemed extreme, but my intuition told me that something sinister lurked behind my sister-in-law's impeccable facade. Byron Queenall, a 30-something ex-cop, now in private investigations, didn't inspire confidence in his appearance. Too bulky with a face scarred from a long-ago incident, and a perpetually wrinkled suit. But his reputation spoke for itself. He solved the most intricate cases and never left a client in the lurch. I need everything you can find on Cassidy Thorndyke, I said, handing him an envelope with a photo and the scant information I possess. Date of birth, place of employment, previous address. Especially interested in her background before she moved to Chicago. Do you suspect anything in particular? Quinell asked, making notes in his tattered notebook. I suspect that she's not who she says she is, and that my son isn't the first man she's used for her purposes. The detective nodded, expressing neither surprise nor disapproval. Apparently, he'd seen enough family dramas over the years to not be surprised by anything. I'll check everything. Previous residences, jobs, education, family ties, criminal history if any. It may take time. I didn't have much time, I admitted. I sense they're preparing something serious. Then I will begin at once. Quinell proved effective. Within a week, he had already called me and asked for a meeting. I have something interesting, he said, as we sat down in the same cave where I had previously met Rollins. Your sister-in-law isn't exactly what she says she is. He opened a file folder and began methodically laying out the facts. Cassidy Thorndyke is not my sister-in-law's real name. She used Tobe Cassandra Terwilliger from Portland, Oregon. There, she worked as an aide at a nursing home, from which she was fired after several complaints from residents' relatives that valuables were missing. It was impossible to prove her involvement, that suspicions were strong. She then moved to Seattle, changed her name to Cassidy Thorpe, and took a job as a realtor. There she met a wealthy widower, Herbert Allen, married him, and after 6 months convinced Him to sell his house and move into a nursing home. The money from the sale was deposited into a joint account, which Cassidy emptied within a week of, placing her husband in the cheapest facility she could find. When Herbert's relatives tried to intervene, they found that Hare had signed papers stripping them of any custody rights. There are 2 other men with similar stories, Quinnell continued, flipping through the pages of the file in Boise and Salt Lake City. Each time's changed her name, her appearance, but the pattern was the same. Meet a single, financially well-off man, hasty marriage, isolate herself from friends and family, sell real estate, transfer funds to joint accounts, disappear. About her family? I asked, remembering Ashton mentioning Cassid's complicated relationship with her parents. She has a sister in Portland, but they haven't communicated in years. Parents died when she was in her 20s. Car accident left a decent life insurance policy, which she promptly squandered on questionable investments. What about a criminal record? No formal charges have ever been filed. She's very careful, makes her victims sign all documents voluntarily. Never U.S. physical violence. Chooses men without close family ties to minimize the risk of family interference. And after the deed is done, she disappears, changes her name, and starts all over again in a new city. I sat stunned by the extent of the deception. Cassidy, or whatever her real name was, wasn't just a greedy inheritance hunter. She was a professional con artist for whom my son was just another victim in a long lineage of deceived men. Do you have proof of all this? I asked when the initial shock had passed. It's all here. Quinnell tapped his finger on a thick folder. Pographs, copies of documents, witness statements, records of bank transactions. Enough to get the police interested. Do you want me to turn the materials over to the authorities? I hesitated. Simply exposing Cassidy could get her arrested, and possibly imprisoned, but that wouldn't solve Ashton's problem. He was so blinded by his love, or what he mistook for love, that he might not believe even the strongest evidence. What's more, Hare could have accused me of trying to destroy his family out of jealousy or spite. No, not yet, I decided. I need to think about how best to use this information. Over the next week, I carefully considered a plan of action. I consulted with Rollins, who suggested several legal strategies, and with Quinnell, offered practical security advice. As a result, we developed a plan in case Cassidy and Ashton decided to take drastic steps. And they didn't tack along. On Thursday, July 14th, at precisely 10 o'clock in the morning, my doorbell rang. On the threshold stood Ashton Cassidy, and an unfamiliar man in an austere suit with a leather briefcase. Mom, this is Mr. Harlow for Notary. Ashton introduced him without the usual greetings. We need to talk, it's important. I stepped back silently, letting them into the house. I knew this day would come and I was ready. There was already a large brown envelope on the living room table, the one that was going to change the course of events. Tay? I offered, observing decorum. Evident thou the atmosphere was tense to the max. This is not a social visit, Myrtle. Cassidy replied with barely concealed impatience. Her eyes glittered with excitement like a predator smelling prey. We have serious business to attend to. I noticed she was no longer bothering to show fake concern. The masks had been dropped. Then let's get down to business. I sat down in my favorite chair, gesturing for them to settle on the couch opposite. Mr. Harlow, a gaunt man with thinning hair and unpleasantly running eyes, opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. Mrs. Edmonds, he began in a formal tone. I'm here to witness the transfer of ownership of this house from you to the new owners. The new owners? I pretended to be surprised. What are you talking about, Mom? Ashton interjected, his voice sounding strained. Cassidy and I bought this house. All the papers have already been signed. But how is that possible? I shifted my gaze from my son to the notary. I didn't sell the house. Actually, you did. Cassidy smiled triumphantly and nodded to Mr. Harlow, who pulled another document out of his briefcase. Here's the deed of sale with your signature. You sold the house to us for $500,000 a month ago. I glanced at the paper. Indeed, there was a signature very similar to mine. It's a forgery, I said calmly. I never signed that document, Mrs. Edmonds. Mr. Harlow adjusted his glasses on his nose. The signature was notarized. If you claim it's forged, you'll have to prove it in court. And that won't be easy, Cassidy added, still smiling. Especially given your condition. My condition? Instead of answering, she pulled another document from her bag and placed it on the table. Dr. Summers' medical report of your incipient dementia and inability to make important decisions for yourself. Based on this report, the court has appointed Ashton as your legal guardian. I took the document and gave it a quick glance. Dr. Summers, whom I had never met, detailed the symptoms of dementia supposedly found in me during an examination that had never been performed. That's fake too, I said, returning the paper to the table. And a pretty crude one at that. I'm examined regularly by Dr. Finch, who can confirm that I'm in perfect health. Doctors' opinions can vary, Cassidy parried. And the court has already ruled. Ashton is now in charge of all your affairs. Financial, medical, legal, and he's decided you'd be better off in a specialized facility where you'll get the care you need. A nursing home, you mean? I turned to my son, who had been avoiding my gaze the whole time. Ashton, did you really agree to this? Sending your mother to a nursing home based on false documents? Mum, it's for your own good, he muttered. But there was no confidence in his voice. You're getting forgetful, saying weird things sometimes, Dr. Summers said. Dr. Summers, who I've never met. I interrupted him. Who was paid to give a false report? We've already found you a lovely place. Cassidy took the lead again. Pine Grove is an excellent nursing home with a skilled staff. They are expecting you today. We've already packed your personal belongings. You entered my home and touched my belongings without permission. I felt anger rising in me, but by an effort of will, I suppressed it. Now was not the time to get emotional. Technically, it's not your house anymore. Cassidy's smile grew even wider. And Ashton, as your guardian, has the right to make decisions about your property. I shifted my gaze to my son, who seemed to want to fall through the ground. Ashton, look at me, I demanded. He reluctantly looked up. Do you really believe that I have dementia? That I'm incapable of living on my own? That I agreed to sell the house I've lived in all my life? The house where you grew up? The house where the memories of your father are buried? Cassidy says. I'm not asking what Cassidy says. I'm asking what you think. He lowered his gaze again, and the gesture told me all I needed to know. My son didn't believe the accusations, but he was too weak toasting up to his wife. Enough talk. Cassidy stood up abruptly. The car ice waiting. Outside. We should be at the Pine Grove by lunchtime. This house is old, and you're going to a nursing home. Her voice rose to a shout, the mask of politeness finally falling away, revealing her true nature. I rose slowly, keeping my composure. Fine, I said, but first, open the envelope. It pointed to a brown envelope lying on the table. Cassidy frowned, clearly confused by my calmness and strange request. What envelope? What games? No games. Just open it if you want this house. Cassidy hesitated, looking suspiciously back and forth. At me in the envelope. What's in it? Open it and you'll find out. With an exasperated sigh, she grabbed the envelope, ripped open the edge, and shipped the contents out onto the table. A stack of documents, photos, and newspaper clippings spilled out. Cassidy glanced at the top sheet and turned pale. It was a picture of her from 10 years ago when she still bore the name Cassandra Terwilliger next to an elderly man. Her first victim. "What is it?" she whispered frantically, thumbing through the papers. Her face grew wider with each new document. Evidence of your fraud," I replied calmly. "Witness statements, bank statements, copies of forged documents you used to defraud the elderly. A complete history of your crimes from Portland to Chicago." "Ashton, she's delusional." Cassidy turned to her husband, her voice breaking into a squeal. "It's all lies. Photoshopped, she's trying to turn you against me." But Ashton had already picked up one of the documents. A police report from Herbert Allen's daughter detailing how Cassidy Thorpe, had defrauded her father and stolen all of his savings. "Cassidy, what is it?" His voice trembled. "Trash." She snatched the paper from his hands. "A forgery. Your mother has gone mad with jealousy. There's also a copy of my real will," I continued, ignoring her tantrum. "Certified by the town's chief notary public. According to this will, the house passes to a charitable foundation for victims of fraud upon my death. A fund I set up a month ago." Mr. Harlow, interested, picked up the document and looked it over quickly. "This is a legal will," he admitted reluctantly, "with Judge Brenton's signature on it." One last thing, I pulled another piece of paper from the envelope. A court order of protection prohibiting Cassidy Edmonds, formerly known as Cassidy Thorpe, Cassidy Blanchard, and Cassandra Terwilliger, from coming near me and my property. The order went into effect yesterday. Autumn in Downers Grove has always been my favorite time of year. The maple leaves in front of the house would turn fiery shades of red and orange, and the air will be filled with a special aroma, a mixture of fallen leaves, smoke from the fireplaces, and ripe apples from the orchard. Of the Brockhurst neighbors. Usually, this time brought me peace and joy, but not this year. It had been 3 months since the day Cassidy and Ashton came to take my house away from me. 3 months that changed my life and my idea of family forever. I spent the first weeks after Cassidy's arrest on a strange days. Outwardly I functioned normally. I got up in the morning, made breakfast, worked in the garden, went to the store, went out with friends. Deep inside, it was as if something had died inside me. The feeling of betrayal, deep, pervasive, poisoning every thought, did not let go for a minute. Most painful of all was the realization that Ashton, my only son, the man I'd raised with love and care, the man I'd instilled the values of honesty and respect in, was capable of such a despicable act. Even though he was manipulated by Cassidy, even though she had a talent for persuasion, even though he was blinded by love, nothing could justify his willingness to send his own mother to a nursing home on the basis of false documents. Every morning when I woke up, the first thing I remembered was his face as he sat next to Cassidy and acquiesced to her plan. The face of a man who had lost not only his conscience but his self-respect. And every morning I asked myself the same question. How did we get to this point? Where did I go wrong in his upbringing? What could I have done differently? Ashton tried to contact me almost immediately after Cassidy's arrest. He called every day, left messages on my answering machine, sent emails, even came and stood on my doorstep begging me to let him in. I didn't answer, not because I was too proud or wanted to punish him. I just didn't know what to say. All words seemed meaningless in the face of such betrayal. "Mum, please let me explain," he said in one of his messages. "I know I made a terrible mistake. I was blinded. I was stupid. I believed her lies. Please give me a chance to make things right." But what was there to fix? Trust once broken can't be glued back together with apologies and promises. It's like a broken china cup. Even if you pick up all the pieces and put them back together, the cracks will still remain and the cup will never be feasome. Besides, I wasn't sure if Ashton was truly remorseful for his actions and not just sorry that his plan had failed. Perhaps it was just the reaction of Eamon caught in the act. Shame mixed with fear of exposure rather than a true realization of the wrongness of his actions. In early October, when I returned from the store once again and found Ashton sitting on my porch steps, I finally decided to talk to him. Not because I was ready to forgive, but because I was tired of the letdown. Webbeth needed to move on, and that required clarity. Ashton, I said, walking up to the porch with the bags in my hands. I think we really need to talk. He jumped up, his face bright with hope. Mum, I'm so glad you finally agreed. I opened the door, led him inside, and walked to the kitchen to put out the groceries. Ashton followed me like a lost puppy, not knowing where to put his hands, what to say. Teared, observing the formalities. Yes, thank you. He sat down at the table, tapping his fingers nervously on the countertop, put the kettle on and silently began laying out my purchases. Milk in the fridge. Bread in the bread box, vegetables in the basket, ordinary, familiar actions that now seemed strangely important. An anchor off normality in the sea of chaos my life had become. How are you? Ashton asked, breaking the silence. How do you think? I replied without turning around. How does a man whose own son wanted to send him to a nursing home to take over his estate feel? Ashton lowered his head. I didn't mean it, Mom. I swear I didn't mean it, Cassidy. She knows how to persuade. She made me believe that you really needed help. That home was too big for you. That you'd be happier in a place where you'd be taken care of. And you believed Yout knew better than anyone what would make me happy without even asking my opinion, even seeing how I resisted the idea. She said it was a natural reaction they till older people resist change at first, but then thank those who insisted on it. I turned to him, feeling a wave of anger rising inside. Older people, I'm not some abstract category for you, Ashton. I'm your mother, the woman who gave birth to you, raised you, loved you your whole life. Can't you see that there's nothing wrong with me? That I'm capable of making decisions, that I'm happy in me home? Yeah, I don't know what happened to me. He covered his face with his hands. It was like I was under hypnosis. She talked and I believed. She suggested and I agreed. Even when the inner voice screamed that it was wrong, I silenced it because she was so sure, so convincing. The kettle boiled and I turned away to make tea. I needed this pause to gather my thoughts. Danger was still bubbling up inside, but there was something else mixed in with it. Pity maybe, or sadness at the realization that my son had proven so weak, so malleable to manipulation. What's wrong with Cassidy? I asked, setting the cups on the table and sitting down across from him. She's under house arrest, awaiting trial. Ashton took the cup but didn't drink. The case is serious. Fraud, forgery of documents, financial abuse of the elderly. She's facing real jail time. And your marriage? What marriage? He grinned bitterly. It's over. I filed for divorce a week after she was arrested. She tried to manipulate me even then, crying, threatening, promising that things would change. But I finally had an epiphany. I drank my tea in silence, looking at my son over my cup. He looked gaunt, dark circles under his eyes, mora grey on his temples. He looked 10 years older. I moved back into my old apartment, he continued after a pause. Had to cancel the contract on that big house we bought. Cassidy convinced me to take out a mortgage I could barely support with my salary. She said her commission from the sale of the property would cover the difference. He shook his head. Another lie. Have you suffered much financially? Enough that it was painful but not catastrophic. Most of our joint accounts were frozen after her arrest, so she didn't have time to transfer the money elsewhere. But I lost the down payment and the house plus attorney's fees. I nodded, not feeling much sympathy. Financial loss was the least of the problems he'd created for himself with his behavior. Mum. Ashton looked me straight in the eye. I know you'll probably never be able to forgive me, and I'm not asking you to, but I want you to know that I'm going to try to make up for what I did for the rest of my life. I'm going to prove to you that I am not the monster I seem to be. That somewhere deep inside there's still that boy you raised with love and principles. I looked at him and saw the desperation in his eyes, the genuine remorse. But I also saw the weakness that had led to this situation, a weakness that could manifest itself again under different circumstances with a different maneuverer. I don't know what to say, Ashton. I answered honestly. Part of me wants to hug you and tell you everything's going to be okay. It's a mother's instinct to protect her child, even when they're wrong. But another part of me can't forget that you were ready to throw me out of my life like I was an unwanted thing. And I don't know which part is stronger. I understand. He lowered his eyes. I don't expect immediate forgiveness. I just want the opportunity to be around, to call, to stop by some times. Maybe in time. Maybe I agreed without much conviction. Time will tell. After Ashton left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring out the window at the falling maple leaves. The conversation had left a bitter taste in my mouth, but also a strange sense of finality, like a page had been turned. A chapter finished. That evening I called Rollins and told him about Ashton's visit. He seems genuinely remorseful, Rollins said after I recounted our conversation. But you don't need to rush into decisions. Give yourself time. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust him again, I admitted. Every time I see him, I remember him sitting next to Cassidy and supporting her plan to send me to a nursing home. Trust is a fragile thing, Rollins agreed. Once shattered, it rarely fully recovers. But maybe you can build something new. Not the same as before, but still a relationship that has room for both of you. Maybe, I echoed, not really believing it too much. Rollins had become a pillar of support for me during those difficult months. He called every day, checking in often, bringing books he thought I might be interested in, taking me to the theater and concerts to distract me from my heavy thoughts. His presence was unobtrusive but constant, like a quiet stream that stealthily but steadily fills a dried-up lake. We had known each other for over 40 years since university, where he taught law and I taught literature. After Richard died, Rollins was one of the few people who visited me regularly, not out of obligation or pity, but out of genuine affection. Looking back now, I realized that his feelings for me had always been deeper than mere friendship. But he had never crossed the line into respecting my marriage and my grief after my husband's death. Ashton never paid much attention to Rollins. To him, he was just a mom friend, one of the many elderly professors who made up my social circle. He didn't notice the care with which Rollins treated me, how attentively he listened, how keenly he sensed my moods. Ashton was too absorbed in himself, his career, his problems to notice such trifles. In late October, Rollins invited me to dinner at a small Italian restaurant on the outskirts of the city. The place was cozy with dimmed lights, soft music, and excellent food. We talked about books, about politics, about trips we'd taken in our youth, about dreams that had gone unrealized. You know, Myrtle, Rollins said as we finished our wine. I've always admired your strength. Back at the university when you stood up, for your point of view in the pulpit, unafraid to go against majority opinion. Then when you raised Ashton practically single-handedly while Richard built his career. And now after everything that's happened, you're not broken. You're not hardened. You still see the beauty in the world, still able to laugh, still open to new experiences. I felt myself blush under his gaze. Warm, admiring, full of tenderness. I'm not sure I deserve those words, I replied, embarrassed, adjusting the napkin in my lap. I'm just living day to day. Sometimes that's all we can do. Just keep living no matter what. That's what strength is. He covered my hand with his to keep living when you feel like giving up on everything. To see the light when there's only darkness around. Yeah, I've always loved that about you, Myrtle. There was a pause filled with unspoken words and feelings. I stared at our hands, his with protruding veins and age spots over mine with thin, almost transparent skin and bulging joints. Hands of men who had lived long lives, who had suffered loss and disappointment, but were still capable of tenderness. Rollins, I began, not knowing exactly what I wanted to say. You don't have to answer, he said quickly, squeezing my hand slightly. I just wanted you to know life is too short for innuendo. We drove home in comfortable silence. Rollins drove, and I stared out the window at the house floating by, lit by streetlights. My thoughts were confusing, but not disturbing. Rather, it was a sense that something important was happening. Something was beginning carefully, unhurriedly, like the first shoots in spring. As we pulled up to my house, I noticed a figure on the porch. Ashton. He was sitting on the steps, slouching as if he'd been waiting a long time. When he saw us, he stood up, shuffling uncertainly from foot to foot. Yorson, Rollins stated, parking the car. Do you want me to leave? No, I replied firmly. Stay, please. We got out of the car and walked up to the porch. Ashton looked tense, his gaze darting between Rollins and me. Mum hesitated, then stammered, noticing Rollins wasn't leaving. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company. Rollins is a friend of mine, I replied calmly. We were at the restaurant. What did you want, Ashton? He ran his hand nervously through his hair. A gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was embarrassed or upset. Yeah, I just wanted to break the news. Cassidy cut a deal with the prosecutor. She's pleading guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. 4 years in prison instead of a possible 10. I see. I nodded, not feeling much emotion about it. Cassidy's fate no longer bothered me. She was a chapter in my life that I had closed. And also Ashton faltered, casting a quick glance at Rollins. I was offered a job in Boston, a good position with a promotion. I'm thinking of taking it. Boston. I tried to picture my son in that historic city on the other side of the country. That's far away, yeah. He looked at his feet. But maybe that's what we both need right now. Distance, time, space for healing. It knew what he meant. Being around each other constantly reopened each other's wounds. I with my silent judgment. He with his guilty looks and awkward attempts at redemption. Maybe distance will actually help us both. I think it's a good solution, I said sincerely. A new beginning. I'll be calling, he added hastily. And come over for the holidays if that's okay with you. Of course I smiled, feeling oddly relieved. Boston's a beautiful city. You'll love it there. We stood in silence, not knowing what else to say. Then Ashton stepped forward awkwardly and hugged me quickly, almost fearfully, as if he was afraid I'd push him away. I didn't respond to the hug, but I didn't pull away. It was a small step, a tiny bridge over the chasm that separated us. Good night, Mom, he said, pulling back. Good night, Mr. Billings. Good night, Ashton. Rollins nodded, keeping a neutral expression on his face. We watched Ashton walk to his car, get behind the wheel, and drive away. His tail lights disappeared around the corner, and the street fell back in silence. Are you okay? Rollins asked as we entered the house. Yeah. I hung me coat on the coat rack and walked into the living room. It's weird, but I'm actually fine. It's like something let go inside. Not completely, but the beginning of the process he finished for me. Healing always starts with small steps. I sat down in my favorite chair, and Rollins settled into the couch across from me. There was space between us, physical and emotional, but it didn't feel insurmountable. Rather, it was a space of respect. A space where each of us could be ourselves without rushing, without forcing things. Tea? I offered, following our usual ritual. I'd love some. Rollins smiled. And in that moment, looking at his kind face illuminated by the soft light off the desk lamp, I felt that despite all the losses and betrayals, life goes on. And perhaps there is still room for something new, something bright. Not a replacement for what was lost, but an addition to my story. A new chapter that I am just beginning to write. Summer in Downers Grove always comes suddenly, as if someone flicks an invisible switch. Yesterday it was still spring with its school rains and timid flowers. And today it's already hot, air conditioner humming, and the smell of cut grass. I love this time of year for its certainty. No half-tones, no compromises, just pure, bright, unapologetic heat. Today marks exactly a year since Cassidy and Ashton came to take my house away. A year since I opened the envelope of evidence that changed the course of events. A year of transformation, pain, realization, and ultimately growth. I spent the morning preparing for a college lecture. The topic, the influence of life experiencing. The perception of literature, required a careful selection of examples and quotes. I arranged my notes on my desk, carefully constructing a logical chain of arguments. At 68, I returned to teaching, not full-time of course, just 2 courses a week, but enough to feel useful, needed, included. The decision to go back to work didn't come right away. After the whole Cassidy thing, I felt devastated and insecure. My son's betrayal had shaken my faith in myself, in my judgment, in my worth. Rollins was the one who supported me in a difficult moment and pushed me to take action. "You've always been a brilliant teacher," he said one day as we ate lunch in the orchard under a blossoming apple tree. "Your students idolized you. Why not go back to doing what you love and do best?" I brushed it off with the standard excuses. Age, the time that had passed since I'd left the university. Change demands. But Rollins was persistent. A local college is looking for a part-time literature instructor. Perfect for you. No administrative work, just pure teaching. And the students would love a professor with your experience and knowledge. In the end, I agreed to at least give it a try. I sent in my resume, interviewed, and was accepted almost immediately. The dean of the college, a woman about my age, and a former faculty member herself, understood the value of the life experience and in-depth knowledge I could bring to the students. My first course, 20th Century American Literature, drew an audience of 25 students of various ages. From yesterday's high school students to middle-aged people who had decided to pursue their education later than usual. I remember my hands shaking as I entered the auditorium on the first day. But once I started talking about Fitzgerald and his The Great Gatsby, all fears receded. I was in my element doing what I loved and knew how to do. Opening up the world of literature to young people, teaching them to see deeper meanings, contexts, and connections. After the end of the semester, several students came up to thank me, saying that my lectures had changed their attitude to reading and analyzing texts. This sincere gratitude was a balm for my wounded soul, a confirmation that I could still be useful, that my experience and knowledge had value. Having finished preparing for the lecture, I decided to take a walk in the garden before heading to the college. The day was warm but not hot, with a light breeze that rustled the leaves of the maple trees. In the corner of the garden, under an old apple tree, Rollins had arranged a small bench. My reflection corner, as he called it. I sat down, enjoying the sunlight filtering through the leaves, and let my thoughts flow freely. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined my life would change so much. Then, shaken by Myson's betrayal, I'd seen nothing but emptiness and loneliness before me. Now, every day was filled with meaning, activity, and communication with interesting people. Besides teaching, I found another occupation that brought deep satisfaction: helping the elderly to protect themselves from fraudsters. It all started by accident. One of my students, Eleanor, worked as a social worker at a local senior center. After hearing my story, which thanks to the efforts of Detective Quinnell, became quite well known in our small town, she asked me to give a presentation to decents visitors on how to recognize scammers targeting the elderly. My first presentation was tentative and confused. I was still embarrassed and ashamed to tell the story of how my own son had participated in an attempt to scam me. That the audience responded with such empathy and interest, asking so many questions, that I realized my story could help others avoid a similar fate. Since then, I have given more than 20 such talks at various senior centers, libraries, and community centers. It talked about common fraud schemes, the psychological techniques that scammers use, and the legal protections that can be taken in advance. My story has become a warning and a guide to action for many seniors, especially those who, like me, live alone and have some savings or assets. A few months ago, Rollins suggested that I turn my scattered notes and presentations into a full-fledged guide. We worked on it together. I described the psychological aspects and shared my personal experiences. He added legal advice and guidance. The booklet, How to Protect Yourself and Your Assets, a guide for seniors, was published with funding from a local foundation and is now distributed free of charge at senior centers throughout the state. This work has become not just an occupation form, but a way of healing, by turning my pain and humiliation into a tool to help others. I regained a sense of control and self-esteem. Every time someone came up after the presentation and thanked me for the helpful information, I felt that Ashton and Cassidy's betrayal had not been in vain. It had served as a lesson that could protect others. As I pondered this, I noticed that the mailman had left something in my mailbox. Rising from the bench, I walked to the wicket and pulled out a stack of letters. Among bills and advertising brochures was a postcard from Boston, a view of the harbor and the old colonial-style buildings. I recognized Ashton's handwriting immediately. "Dear Mom," he wrote, "I hope you are doing well. It's a beautiful spring here. The city is full of flowering trees and tourists. Work is going well. Recently got a promotion. I think of you often. If you ever want to talk, my number hasn't changed. Love, Ashton." A short, formal message that required no response. These cards came regularly at Christmas, on my birthday, sometimes just for no particular reason. Ashton kept his promise. He called every week, sent emails with pictures of Boston twice, offered to come for the holidays. I answered the phone, but our conversations were superficial weather, work, city news, never about the past, about betrayal, about Cassidy. I politely declined his offers to come over, citing busyness or ill health. We both knew they were excuses. But the game went on. He offered. I refused. He didn't insist. I didn't explain. A strange dance of mother and son, who can neither completely sever the relationship nor truly repair it. Sometimes in moments of weakness, I missed Ashton, not the grown man who had betrayed me, but the little boy with the mop of unruly hair and curious eyes, the teenager who came to me with questions about life and literature. The young man proudly showed me his first office. But then I remembered his face the day to come with Cassidy and the Notary. His acquiescence to the plan to send Mito a nursing home. His inability to protect his own mother. And my heart grew stony again. Rollins had said that in time I would be able to, if not forgive, at least let go of that pain. That hatred and resentment poisoned the person who felt it in the first place. I knew he was right. But the healing process can't be rushed or forced. It takes its own course, its own speed. I put the card on the table, deciding to think about an answer later. Right now, I had to get ready for the lecture. The college was only a 15-minute walk from my house. One of the reasons why this job suited me so well. I loved those hot walks watching the changing seasons, the life of the city, the people going about their business. At such moments, I felt part of a large living organism, not an isolated elderly woman in an empty house. The lecture was a success. Students actively participated in the discussion, asked interesting questions, shared their observations. A girl named Leah stood out in particular, sharp, attentive, with an unusual perspective on classical texts. She reminded me of myself in my youth, just as passionate, just as devoted to literature. After class, Leah approached me with a book in her hands. "Professor Edmonds, I read your pamphlet on protecting yourself from scammers," she said, a little embarrassed. "My grandmother recently faced a similar situation. Someone tried to scam her over the phone, posing as bank employees. Your advice helped her recognize the scammers and avoid losing money." I felt a rush of warmth. Here it is, confirmation that my work has real meaning, that it helps people. I'm very glad the information was helpful. I replied sincerely. "Your grandmother was very wise to be vigilant. She would like to thank you personally," Leah continued. "Perhaps you could find time to stop by and see her. She lives near the college in a house on Oak Street." I agreed and we arranged to visit the following week. Such meetings have always been fulfilling for me. Seeing people who have been helped by my story. Hearing their gratitude and sharing experience and advice. Returning home, I reflected on how my life had changed over the year. The house that Cassidy and Ashton had tried to take away was now officially assigned to me for life, with the stipulation that it be donated upon my death to a fraud victims fund I had set up. This decision, made in a moment of crisis as a protective measure, now seemed right and meaningful to me. The house, which meant so much to me, would not become an object of discord or profit, but would serve a noble purpose, to help those who were in a situation like mine. Cassidy had received her 4 years in prison, and was now serving her sentence in a women's correctional facility 200 meters away. I had not followed her fate, nor did I feel any schadenfreude at her punishment or sympathy for her situation. She simply ceased to exist in my reality, becoming a character from the past, mentioned only in the context of my educational lectures. Sometimes I wondered if she had changed, if she had realized the harm she was doing to her victims, or was she simply planning new schemes that she would implement after her release? But I quickly dismissed those thoughts. Cassidy no longer deserved a place in my head or heart. As I approached the house, I saw Rollins' car in the driveway. Over the course of that year, our relationship had grown from a friendship to something more. Not a passionate affair, of course. That would have been ridiculous at our age. But a deep, warm affection between two people who had lived long lives and found understanding, support, and tenderness in each other. We didn't live together. Each of us was too used to our own space and rhythm of life. But we spent a lot of time with each other. We had dinner, went to the theater, traveled around the neighborhood, just sat next to each other, reading or talking. Sometimes stay the night, and then I'd wake up with a sense of security and peace I hadn't felt since Richard's death. "Rollins," I called out, entering the house. In the kitchen, Dashi called back, and I smelled the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Rollins was standing at the stove, stirring something in a pot. Vegetables, herbs, and spices were spread out on the table. "Decided to make dinner," he explained, smiling. How was the lecture? Great. I set my bag on the chair and went over to kiss his cheek. The students were very active, and a girl named Leah came up after class and told me that our brochure helped her grandmother avoid being scammed. See? Rollins looked pleased. I told you your experience could help a lot of people. You're doing an important thing, Myrtle. I sat down at the table watching him deftly chop vegetables. There was the same confidence and precision in his movements, as in his legal arguments, the result of years of practice and attention to detail. It's exactly 1 year today, I said quietly. Rollins nodded without turning around. I know. That's why I came in early. Thought you shouldn't be alone tonight. His concern touched me to the core. He always remembered important dates. Always knew when I needed support, even if I didn't realize it myself. Another card from Ashton. I nodded at the table where the Boston card lay, the usual. Nothing special, just a reminder of his existence. Rollins took the card, read the short text, and put it back. He's trying to keep in touch as best he can, he remarked in a neutral tone. Rollins never pressed me on the issue of my relationship with my son, nor did he advise me to either forgive or finally break up with him. He respected my pain and my right to decide for myself. Sometimes I wonder if it's time to invite him over for a visit, I admitted, surprised at my own words. Just to close this chapter. I don't know. You don't have to decide now. Rollins placed a cup of coffee in front of me. Not today, not tomorrow, not a month from now. You can give yourself as much time as you need. I took the cup, savoring the warmth emanating from it. Time was what was the most valuable gift I had received after all this time. Time to live by my own rules, to do things that are fulfilling, to socialize with those who respect and appreciate me. Time to not just be Ashton's mom, or Richard's widow, but Tobe myself, Myrtle Edmonds, a woman with her own desires, fears, hopes, and plans. I didn't know if I could ever fully forgive my son, or regain the trusting relationship we used to have. But I knew for sure no one would ever be able to control my life again, to decide it for me, to tell me how and where to live. This freedom from manipulation, from toxic relationships, from imposed expectations, was perhaps the most important accomplishment of this difficult year. After dinner, Rollins and I sat in my garden, watching the sun slowly sink below the horizon, coloring the sky in shades of pink and gold. Summer evenings in Downers Grove, smell of jasmine and cut grass, ringing with children's laughter and the chirping of cicadas. I breathed in those smells, listened to those sounds, and felt deeply grateful that I could do this here in my home, in my garden, surrounded by memories and plans for the future. What are you thinking about? Rollins asked, noticing my thoughtfulness about how amazingly life works. I replied, "A year ago, I thought it was over. My home, my security, my independence, and today I have all of that and more. I have a purpose, a job that is fulfilling, people who appreciate me." I looked at him fondly. "I have you." Rollins took my hand and kissed my fingers lightly. "And I have AO," he said simply. "Everything else is details." We sat in the garden until it into the night, talking about books, about students, about plans for our next trip to Chicago, where a new production of Rollins's favorite play was in the theater. An ordinary evening of 12 elderly people finding peace and joy in each other's company. When we finally returned to the house, I went to the table where the card from Ashton lay. I took a pen and wrote a short reply on the back of one of my business cards. "Dear Ashton, thank you for the card. I am doing well. I'm teaching at a local college and working on a new brochure about protecting myself from scammers. If you're ever in the area, let me know in advance. Mom, not an invitation, but not a rejection either. A tiny step, a tiny opportunity for a future conversation. A real conversation when we were both ready. I put the card in the envelope, wrote the address, and set it aside to mail tomorrow. Then I turned off the light in the living room and went up to the bedroom where Rollins was waiting for me. Another day of my new life had come to an end. A life I had built on my own terms against all attempts to take it from me. And that perhaps was my greatest victory.